too often we can fall into this trap of a victim or feeling like we don't have a choice. You have a choice. I had a choice when I decided to be happy. It was, that sounds crazy. It was like a light bulb moment for me. When the thought came to me, because I was I was sad, I was scared, and I was feeling a little bit sorry for myself. And then the thought was like, Valorie, be happy now. Not when you get what you think you need to be happy. Like, just be happy. You have a lot to be happy about. And it was like, can I do that? Can I just decide to be happy? I was like, yes, you can. You don't have to be happy about what happened, but you can find joy today.
It always blows my mind a little bit that 66.5% of you who regularly watch this channel are not subscribed. So before we dive in, I'd like to ask a little favor. If you're enjoying these videos, if you're finding value in them and you want to support me and this work, I have a easy, simple, and free way for you to do that. And that's hitting that subscribe button. It helps more people discover the channel. It helps people get this information that you are finding valuable. And it helps my work make a difference. And here's my promise to you in return. I'll keep showing up. I will listen to you. I will try and create the content that is most of value to you. I will listen to your feedback and I will keep bringing you topics, insights, and guests on my podcast that you want to see. This channel is really here to support your learning, my learning, all of our learning and growth. And I appreciate so much you being part of it. And again, subscribing in order to help support me bring you this work. Thank you. Welcome to the Coaching Studio. I'm your host, Lyssa deHart. And today I have the honor of sitting down with a true force in the coaching world, Valorie Burton, MCC. She is an international best-selling author with 14 books, a master certified coach, and the founder of the Coaching and Positive Psychology Institute, or CAP for short, where she has trained coaches from across the world in the science of resilience and personal transformation. Her influence extends far and wide. She is a coaching mentor for the Maxwell Leadership Certified Team Coaching Training, and she's worked with over 50,000 leaders in 150 countries. She was recently named to the Coaches 50, recognizing the most influential executive coaches in the world. And you may have seen her on NBC, The Today Show, CNN, or read her wisdom in O Magazine. But beyond the accolades, Valorie's journey is one of adaptability and deep-rooted resilience. Having lived in 7 states as well as abroad, 34 addresses in total. We'll get into that. And she knows what it means to navigate change. She has found her home on a horse farm, which is the place that she has lived the longest of anywhere so far. And family is at the heart of her life. Her daughters call her B mom for bonus mom. And she also has an 11-year-old son. And in a twist of fate, she and her husband went to middle school and high school together. But it took them 1,500 miles to meet in Atlanta to actually get together. And that's kismet for sure. Her latest book, Rules of Resilience, dives into what truly makes people bounce back stronger. And today we'll explore what holds us back, how to let go of guilt, and why small mindset shifts can unlock incredible personal and professional breakthroughs. I'm literally giddy for the conversation. Valorie, thank you. Welcome to the show.
Lyssa, thank you for the invitation. I'm excited to get to have this conversation with you.
I'm not kidding, super excited to get to have this conversation with you. I tend to start with really, What has been your sort of your journey, your arc that has brought you to the place you find yourself? Because nobody just starts off where you are, right? Like, so what were some of the interesting steps along the way for you?
Wow. Well, when it comes to coaching, I discovered it after I discovered my purpose around inspiring others to live more fulfilling lives, that I would do that through writing and speaking. So I started writing and wrote my first book. I had my epiphany about this purpose in your neck of the woods. I was in Seattle for a journalism convention way back in the last century, if you remember that. It was 1999. I was standing at a Barnes and Noble across from the convention center and just had this epiphany about my life purpose. And I started writing my first book about 3 weeks later. And I just knew that was a mission I was on. And those speaking opportunities started coming from the writing opportunities. And then I was in public relations, which is why I was at a journalism convention. And so I had lots of media opportunities, and they kept calling me a coach. And I kept going, no, I'm not a coach. And they're like, we've got to call you something. And you know how that is in the coaching world, right? People just slap the word coach on whatever. And so I got curious about what coaching was.
Really?
I happened to have a literary agent who had a life coach who was a client of his, and he's the first one that told me about life coach. And I was a little skeptical about it, but I'll never forget that. It was 2000, and his client was about to be on Oprah, and he's like, watch her on Monday. And I did. And that was my first kind of intro to coaching. And it was a couple of years before I decided to go through some training. And that first training was with Thomas Leonard, the late Thomas Leonard. And it was so powerful. I felt like I had found my people. And it just continued from there. What I realized is that coaching was the one-on-one of what I was writing about and what I was speaking about around personal growth. And coaching made me a better writer and a better speaker, because now I wasn't just writing and speaking from my perspective, but I was dealing with so many different perspectives and stories and challenges and opportunities. And it just enriched me while my clients were getting a lot out of it. And then, of course, I was getting coached. So as I had these great coaches and I saw my life changing and saw how it worked, I was just in love with coaching, and I've never fallen out of love with it. I think everybody should have a coach as long as they're mentally healthy and functioning. I mean, I think young people can use coaches. I think retirees can use coaches, and everybody in between.
Yeah. The thing that's so funny too, as you say that, is what I also think getting your own coaching. So even if I think maybe everybody should go through coach training, because I honestly think that's just life altering. Even if you don't want to be a coach, just getting the training is so powerful as you do that work and start to find what you're passionate about. And maybe it isn't coaching in and of itself, but it is that way of being with people.
Well, the coach training almost immediately helped me listen better. I realized I could practice mindful and active listening in every conversation. And that was powerful because coaching is a form of communication. So I feel like it made me better in relationships, but then it stretched me because obviously as coaches, we need to be walking the talk. So it made me look at my own life, my own business, and how I might get better. Oh, yeah. And then every challenge was a coaching opportunity. And I've had some challenges that I didn't want to have, but I was like, here's your coaching opportunity, Valorie. and it's worked. That's why I have so much conviction around it, because coaching has changed my life. I would not be who I am, meaning just in my essence, if not for the tools of coaching. And I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Singing to the choir, definitely singing to the choir here. I'm with you. What really drew you? Because you are well known for, I mean, you have a school, positive resilience and positive psychology. What really drew you to these particular themes?
Oh, well, if you look at my strengths, love of learning is in my top 5. So as I was learning coaching, so I went through my first coach training in 2002 and then continued in 2005, which is when I first got my first ICF credential. And like I said, I was just so enamored of coaching. And I was wondering, like, is there something that proves this out? It felt, especially at that time, like coaching was very anecdotal. It was a lot of people who knew it worked, but it was kind of like, this is what I did, so this is my method.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to know, was there something else, like something that could prove it out? And that's when I discovered the work of Dr. Martin Seligman in positive psychology. And I was like, ooh, like when I had thought of psychology before, like I remember in the 90s at one point, I even looked into like a graduate program in counseling, but it didn't quite resonate. Like it was interesting, but I don't like dealing with problems all the time. Like we need somebody to help us deal with problems. I love dealing in opportunity and I'm very future minded. That's another strength of mine. So when I discovered positive psychology, that was huge for me. And I went back to graduate school to study applied positive psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. So that was a biggie for me. And in that opportunity, I began doing, well, one of my professors was Dr. Karen Rivich. She wrote The Resilience Factor, which was just a fantastic book, and began doing more resilience work. And so I had some opportunities to do that. And by that point, it was the recession. Remember that recession way back in 2008, 2009? And I realized, gosh, resilience is not a subject I really had thought much about. But here I was not only studying it and helping others to become more resilient, but I found myself in the midst of a divorce. I needed resilience. So it was like, okay, you got a chance to use this grad degree in positive psychology. Does this stuff really work? I believed it worked, but I had to put it to work for myself. And so many of the decisions I made during that period of my life, I actually was looking at, what does the science say about this? And I knew what it said. I leaned on my faith as well. And those two things actually were very well aligned. And so this is where, for me, the positive psychology and the resilience came. So I finished the graduate program in positive psychology in 2008. And I always had the goal when I applied to it. I wanted to help coaching to have this academic and research-based underpinning. And I thought I would create a training program to do that. So that's how it all weaves together, Lyssa.
That's beautiful, though. It's so funny. I think you and I crossed paths in Seattle, but we just didn't have the kismet to meet at that moment. I was there for a Gottman Institute training. And so I did a bunch of Gottman Institute training.
Oh, I love his work.
It's
their work, I should say.
Geniuses, they really are. But I also remember I was at a psychotherapy networker conference in like 1998. I want to say, I'm making this up, I could be wrong. I slept since then. But Martin Seligman was there talking about positive psychology. And so but what I really love in what you're saying is the theoretical knowledge that you had about this process. You understood the research behind it. And yet, how do we apply what we know to ourselves in the middle of what is for us a disruption? And the requirement for us to show up with resilience is absolutely fundamental. And what did you learn through this experience that you had?
Okay, so I did a few things. One, I I didn't want to slip into depression. When we go through difficult challenges, like that can be a real result. We have to, we have to find our hope. That's not always easy to do. I was 36 going through a divorce. I had always imagined myself a mom. I had no kids. And I was like, this wasn't the way I was planning my life to go. And I was very afraid to hope for what I really wanted because I didn't know if I was going to get it. Besides, when you're going through a divorce, worrying about like what the life's going to be in 5 or 6 years is kind of hard because you're looking at all this massive change that's happening right now. So knowing that I had dealt with mild depression in my 20s and in my teens, I remembered one of the little bits of research around movement and exercise. And I ran track in high school. I wasn't a great track runner. I was decent, but I never liked the 1 mile warm up. I was a sprinter. And I was like, I've got to work out. I've got to run. It doesn't matter. I know that 60 minutes of cardio can be as effective as, antidepressants for mild depression. I'm not trying to diagnose anybody here, but let me try this. And I started running on a track nearby. On those days, I felt different. The running was like forward movement towards a vision I could imagine. I saw my life starting over. I could imagine, and I had hope for what the vision was that I wanted. I also knew that relationships matter when it comes to your happiness, your joy, your contentment. Relationships matter. And so I remember like praying about that because I had dreams that maybe I could do something in television. So I had thought, if I'm going to move, maybe I'll move to LA, maybe I'll move to New York. And as I was praying, I felt like these hands were pulling me south. Why? Because I grew up all over because my dad was in the Air Force. But I spent all my summers in the Southeast because my parents are from South Carolina. So most of my family's between Atlanta and North Carolina. And it was like, you can start over, and you can start over where your people are, where the people who love you, that you love are. And by the way, if you do want to eventually get married again, it would probably be easier to marry somebody who's already where you want to be than to try to convince somebody in New York or LA to move to the Southeast.
Yeah, super smart.
The relationships piece was important. And the other piece was just processing it, right? Like, I love the research from Dr. Laura King that says just writing through your life traumas has health benefits and it helps you process things. And so I was like, I got to get more therapy. I mean, I got to get like the post-marriage therapy. Like, what happened? What do you need to learn from this? What's it going to take to heal? How do you not end up in the same situation again? I need to walk the talk. So I did those kinds of things. When I got to Atlanta, I had a friend that I had known from some of my speaking engagements, and she and her husband pastored a church in Norcross, Georgia. And I was like, I'd never heard him preach, but I was like, it would be easier to go somewhere where I already have a friend. So I hope that I like his preaching. And I went, and 10 minutes in, I was like, I'm home at Victory World Church. So I just did the things that the research shows really help you to be more resilient. I worked on my thoughts. I was saying some stuff to myself that was not helpful. Like, my life is over. I don't have a right to coach anybody or write any books or stand on a stage and speak. My life isn't perfect. And I had to question that thought. And it was like, is that helping you? Is that even true? And what happened for me out of this, I just became more compassionate because I had a great deal of fear around what other people thought. A lot of fear of rejection and disapproval. And it was, what was the coaching opportunity? The opportunity to push past that fear and stop worrying about other people and making sure I'm doing what I need to do to be whole, to have the right vision, to push forward, to be courageous. That's what I did. So the coaching, the positive psychology, all the resilience work, it works. And it's part of why I'm so passionate about it.
Quick interruption. And I just want to say thank you so much for being on my channel, for liking and subscribing to the work that I'm doing. It means a great deal to me, and I am very appreciative of it. I also want to extend an invitation to my monthly Q&As so that you have an opportunity. If you're a coach, it's my treat. Sign up below or follow the link, and you can come each month and have an opportunity to get a resource development CCE, as well as participate in a really rich conversation about how we show up as coaches and what we would like to have be playing with in our own work, basically. So you are invited, and thank you for being here.
You know, it's so funny. I remember I was a therapist for 20 years before shifting into coaching. And I remember somebody sitting in my office and we were listening, and she was sharing with me some of her internal narrative. And I asked her, you know, to kind of like, what would she say to somebody else if she heard this stuff? And she said, I would think they were being abusive. And it was sort of that aha moment for her that she was abused, that was self-abuse. And it didn't stop it immediately, but that awareness and the being curious. And that's really what I'm hearing from you also, is that willingness to be courageous and explore the learning and what this is doing and how this is impacting me and what do I intentionally choose to do differently.
Yes. Yeah. And so that thought that somehow I didn't have a right to write books that help people or to coach people or to speak.
Because you weren't perfect, right?
It wasn't perfect. I was like, well, who said your life needs to be perfect to inspire? In fact, it's typically in the imperfections that you learn and you grow and people connect.
Yeah.
That's what I found. And people would literally say things to me like, wow, just the fact that you went through that, I went through that. Now I feel like I can relate. I had it all. I had this idea that was totally not accurate or true. And I had to question myself and think differently to move forward.
How could coaches or therapists, honestly, I think any of the people in these helping professions really need to hear this, but how can they invite more of what you are talking about?
So one of the most important pieces is just helping people develop awareness of their thoughts. What are you saying to yourself? Is it helping? Is it true? I mean, a lot of the is it true? If you just stop, there are things you're saying that are simply not true. Like, I'm not capable, or I don't have the right to, and you fill in the blank of what that is. Now, maybe someone told you that, or maybe you got that from somewhere and you've never really thought about it. But if you became aware of what you're saying, you can question it and you can decide whether you're going to keep that as your thought or if you're going to choose a new one. And it was so empowering to me when I chose something new. I mean, the thought of your life is over. I don't know what I'm going to do. These were my thoughts. I was like, what are you going to do?
36.
Yeah. You're going to hopefully keep living, and hopefully you're going to have a clear vision of what you want. And hopefully you're going to figure out some things you may need to do differently or some ways to show up differently.
Yeah.
That's what you're going to do. and you're going to live fully. That was one of my biggest lessons. It was a decision that I made a few months before I turned 40, that I was just going to be happy. Whether I got married again or ever had kids. Because I can go through things miserable or I can go through them happy. I mean, we're not always going to be happy about what happens, but we choose how we show up. And that really is a choice. And I'm not talking about pretending to be happy while you're going through something really awful. What I'm saying is that as you process and as you move forward, at some point, you make a decision. And that's what I decided to do because I could not control whether everything I wanted was going to come together, but I did not want to hold my happiness hostage to my circumstances. I decided I had a lot to be grateful for. I had a lot to contribute. And I was going to run with the things I could control, which is, it's part of what I talk about in Rules of Resilience. One of my favorite rules in the book is control the controllable and accept the rest. You don't have to like the rest, but accept the stuff that you don't have any control over. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah. And just, that whole letting it go and just being with reality and then figuring out how you want to respond and react to it. You bring up your book, Rules of Resilience. Is there a rule that you think is often overlooked by people on their journey?
So I think probably I like all the rules in the book. I'm like, I'm not going to say my favorite. Oh my gosh, there's so many, but there is one that when I discovered it was very eye-opening. It's one of the last rules in the book. It's simply close your energy gap. So it's this idea that a lot of times we've got a goal or a vision and we don't consider how big is this goal? Like if your goal is a 10 and then you ask yourself, what's my energy level? Like for investing in this goal, persisting in this goal. For many people, their energy level does not match the level of the goal that they have. And then they're frustrated when they're burned out, when they feel like giving up, not realizing that they have not recognized how much it's going to take to get to that finish line. And if your battery's not charged enough or your tank's not full enough, it's not that you don't have what it takes. It's that you may need more rest. You may need to replenish. You may need more resources. And so I know for myself, because I'm a pretty optimistic person, that this was really huge to recognize the bigger the goal, the more energy you're going to need. That means you've got to have a plan for that energy. That probably means you got to take seriously what you're feeding your body, how much water you're drinking, whether you're taking breaks and, whether you're working out, like there you go. All of this. And do you have the support system that helps you to maintain that energy? So that was pretty big for me, but I can give you all the rules. They're all good, Lyssa.
Yeah. I'm going to be putting links to not all of them because there's 14 of them and I don't have them on the webpage. But I'm going to be putting definitely a link to many of your books. But the thing that really I love in what you're sharing is, and I often think of it as, look, everybody's got a pie every day and you've got that much energy. And to your point, you can create more energy if you're taking care of yourself, if you're doing the self-care things that are required in order to bring more energy. That may be different for different people. It might be, probably exercise is good for everyone, but for some people it may be writing, for some people it may be doing art, for some people it might be dancing or singing or whatever that is that generates energy. But you have this pie, and how are you splitting this pie up? And there's only so much. Like, you've got this pie, it's it for the day. And I just had something similar as a place where I had to sort of stop and take a look. I'm in the middle of writing my fourth book, and I'm not quit. I got 10 to go.
That's a huge accomplishment, Lyssa. We are not going to downplay it. That's awesome.
Playing. Across my email, and I'm like, oh my God, that would be so much fun. It's this volunteer position. It would be awesome, but it requires 2 days a week of work. And I'm like,
can't do it.
And I said to my husband, oh my gosh, I feel so sad because I would really love to take this opportunity and do this volunteer position. And he's like, you don't even have 2 hours a month.
Oh, you're a time optimist too.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's also what are we saying yes to and what are we saying no to?
Yes.
And how are we creating healthy boundaries of this is really important to me. And I'm at a 10 on wanting to accomplish it. And my energy is at a 7. What do I need to do to up it? And some of that may be letting go of some things that maybe I like, but aren't as important, are not at a 10 for me. If this is really truly a 10. If it's not really a 10, maybe I don't need to be writing the book.
Yeah. And if you notice that, if you're aware of it, you can be very intentional about, oh, wait a minute, I really need to make sure that I'm keeping my schedule clear, that I'm paying attention to my energy level. The other thing that can come up is you could just have a lot of just really big things happening. It could just be in the course of a week. For example, my family and I yesterday went to a funeral for a young person. And this morning I had some recordings I needed to do. And just talking through that last night, I got up this morning and I was like, not today. I will get to that. You have to be aware of what the things you're dealing with are taking out of you, and you're going through something difficult, or you've got more going on at work, or maybe you've got something going on in your family. Maybe you're taking care of parents. Maybe something's happening with your children or a sibling or other loved one. That is taking some energy. So if you expect yourself to still be operating up here, but you've drained some energy because you're having to use it for something else, you've got to be aware of those things. And we can be really hard on ourselves.
That's the
piece. We can be hard on ourselves and expect that we're going to keep performing at a certain level when we're having to give so much more. This happened, for example, in the pandemic. It was like, this was a collective trauma that we went through. You probably need to sleep a little longer or take some naps every week because you're just processing. And I think this is true with all that's going on in our world. So the energy level can be easy for us to expect it to always be high. But if you're realistic, you can persevere a lot longer because you recognize when you need to replenish reserves, when you need to fill your tank, and you don't feel guilty about that because you recognize energy's finite. It's not infinite.
It's a pie.
And at the point, it's all gone.
Yeah, I ate my pie today. Or I left and you enjoy it this evening. And I think also the piece I'm hearing is the honoring the truth of it.
Yes.
Like pretending like I just kind of muscle through. I'm going to just grind through this like depletion that I'm in. And I think that is a part of, and I would love your thoughts on this, but I think that's a kind of a part of the problem if we have a problem of how people get so overwhelmed, so mildly depressed, helpless feeling, overwhelmed. I think I've now said several times, but I think that's such a big part of it is that we have these expectations of ourselves that we're supposed to always be operating at a 10, when in fact, we have a loved one we're taking care of, or we have, like yesterday, my dog had to go to the veterinarian. And so I had planned for the day. The plan kind of got set to the side because I had to take my sweet little puppy to the veterinarian. She's totally fine, but it shifts, right? And so if I'm thinking, and then I still have to get it all done, it may be unrealistic. And I think that that's the invitation that I hear you offering people.
Yes. So very simple self-coaching question. What do I need right now?
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't even ask ourselves, what do I need? Like maybe all you need is to hear someone acknowledge your hard work, or maybe you need to acknowledge it. I think of the work of Dr. Kristen Neff around self-compassion and the fact that just saying to yourself, this is hard, lowers your cortisol level.
Yes.
Like, just give yourself a little hug or a little pat Like that literally lowers stress. Just acknowledge, yeah, this I'm going through right now, or today was hard. So I've made it through. I may have used up all the energy I've got. When might be a better time for me to do these other things? Or what expectation do I need to shift? I use a self-care framework in the chapter around energy, which is simply, we can't just listen, right, for what it is that we need. We have to honor what we hear. Those two things are not the same. And so paying attention to yourself, mind, body, and spirit is great. But are you honoring it? Meaning, are you taking actions or making changes that line up with what you are noticing? And sometimes we're noticing, you're listening, but have we really taken action to make changes? Whether that means, like I said, getting more rest or asking for help or changing the schedule because you realize it's not reasonable anymore.
Yeah. No, the honoring piece is definitely fundamental to, I think it's honestly fundamental to actually making a change. Because we give a lot of lip service, and you had said earlier, you have to walk your talk. And I think that's it, right? Like, it's not like people don't have enough YouTube videos or books or podcasts or something they can listen to. They have learned this information. The information is abundant. It's in your book. It's in the cosmos, in the universal consciousness, right? And yet, applying it to ourselves is the place where most of us get hung.
Yes. Because applying, that's extra effort. It's change sometimes. It takes time, right? It might ruffle feathers. All of those things can get in our way. And I think what's most important is to notice when something's getting in the way and to stop and to coach around that. What's really going on here? Why do I keep getting stuck? What could I do differently? When have I done it well? And what could I learn from that? How could I apply that here?
Yeah.
And as we know, because coaching can happen in a fairly short amount of time, when we're willing to pause and ask those kinds of questions, we often get the answer we need, but it's about whether or not we'll pause and ask the questions.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So we kind of started with a rule that maybe is often overlooked, but then you said there's so many other good rules. What's another rule that we should hear from you and your book?
So, rally your resources is one of my favorites. So often when we think of resilience, a big piece is around how we think, right? And one of the rules is choose thoughts that strengthen you. So be very intentional about your thoughts. But rallying your resources is really important because there's an explanation I have in the book for how to create your own personal system of resilience, right? You need the adaptive skills, which are largely inside, like how do I think? How do I approach? What's my strategy? But we also need these protective resources. These are things external to you that can make a big difference. It's everything from money to your training or your education, your experience, the people in your life that may be able to provide connections and opportunities or a safe spot to land when something goes wrong, a listening ear, all of those things that are technically outside of you are your protective resources. It's really important to intentionally build those. And I think that we're living in a world where it's harder to make sure that you are initiating and nurturing and cultivating strong relationships, because it's easier than ever to stay to yourself and stay in your own little world and worry about your stuff. Not, I don't mean that insulting, like it's little, but you understand what I mean? Like we get caught up in what's right in front of us, what's on our phone, what's in our email. And strong relationships are one of the strongest predictors of resilience. And so it is essential. But you have to think about it. I mean, oftentimes we have resources we don't tap into, we don't notice. So it's the combination of being intentional about building them, right? I think there are a lot of people who go through coach training who have great careers, but they're thinking, if I can learn these coaching skills, it may help me in my role. Maybe it's an internal coaching role, maybe it's a leadership role. But you know what? It's also a skill set that I can draw on if I'm laid off or when I retire, and I still want to be able to use all this experience and background I have, but I'd like to do it on my own terms. And so I don't want to, I want a regular job, but I still have lots left to contribute. That's a form of resilience. You're building up a resource, a skill that is transferable in a lot of different ways that allows you to leverage it in another season of life. So when you think of your resources, I think in that way of what could I build? What would help me bounce back if the unexpected happened? You begin looking for ways to build your relationships, build your skills, build your financial cushion, right? That's a protective resource. So rallying your resources takes a little longer than immediately changing a thought. But I think as coaches, we need to be helping our clients notice the system of resilience they're building for themselves, because we don't know what's coming down the road.
Yeah.
But we should be prepared and prepared by being intentional.
Yeah. And being prepared really for anything, because anything is possible. As you're talking about that, I'm thinking also about the epidemic of loneliness that we have not just in the United States or in North America. It's really a global problem. I mean, it's a global pandemic of loneliness. I have some theories about it. I think we spend an awful lot of time interacting with these things more than with each other and having conversations with each other. And I think what you're talking about is this cultivating the rallying your resilience or how did you say it?
Rally your resources.
Rallying your resources is so important, because it is really about these relational experiences that we're having and cultivating the ones that are useful to supporting us to be our best selves, but also have more adaptability and in whatever gets tossed our way. Because, truly, God only knows what it'll be, right? And then there's just so many unexpected possibilities could show up tomorrow. And to how do we take care of ourselves so that we can be prepared, and at least in the best possible mindset for handling whatever, whether on a micro level or a macro level, just having that capacity.
Absolutely.
You talked a bit about it earlier, but I'd love to hear maybe more about what you see as the role of self-compassion in resilience.
Oh, I think it's huge. If you're one of those people that beats yourself up because maybe you got it wrong, maybe you made a mistake, maybe you failed, maybe you just flat out failed. Self-compassion, for me, it's allowed me to just accept that I'm flawed and imperfect. Oh, Valorie, more evidence you're very human. And that, for me, that was huge. But I find, especially for those who like to achieve, and I would say most people that find a coach, they're achievers. They enjoy goal setting. They enjoy growing. That's why they hire a coach. Obviously, then you like success. And so when things don't go as planned, a A very unresilient strategy is to only look at all the things you've done wrong. And you can stay there. You can ruminate on that. You can start to beat yourself up and feel guilty about things you feel you did or didn't do. I think one of the most important things that you can do is to say, now, if this was somebody dealing with this same issue and it was somebody I really love, my best friend, my sibling, my child, how would I talk to them about this? What would I say? And likely, you would not say the same stuff you're saying to yourself. You wouldn't be beating them up. You wouldn't be saying, that was so dumb. What is wrong with you? You never get it right. That's not how you talk to your good friends. And hopefully not how you're talking to your child or your spouse when they are they're already down. Yeah. Typically, you're saying, you're being so hard on yourself. You worked so hard at that. Sometimes things just don't work out. You have another opportunity, or maybe there's something to learn from it. And when you realize, you wouldn't talk to them that way, the question becomes, so why would you talk to yourself that way?
Yeah.
Treat yourself as kindly as you treat your best friend, the people that you love when they go through something hard. And so that takes practice. If you're somebody who has the habit of beating yourself up, of being really hard on yourself. Mm-hmm. If you can just for a minute be kind, even if it's just to say, oh, this is awful. I just don't like being in this circumstance. I didn't mean to end up here. Yes, I like to replace should with could, right? I should have known better. How about I could have if, but that's not what it was. And then make a decision to forgive yourself and maybe eventually take a lesson from it. Keep going. Have permission, like I said, to be imperfect, like letting go of this idea that perfection is even a possibility. I'm looking for progress over perfection.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I've never met anybody who's genuinely interesting who hasn't made a bunch of mistakes.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have any stories. Yes, it went well. It went so well.
You have no stories. Go fall flat on your face and come back with the story.
What can be more interesting? I remember a client of mine who was going through a PhD program, and they asked them to do a failure resume. Have you heard of these failure resumes?
No, but I love this.
And so he had to write down every failure in this resume that he had pretty much starting at 7. And then what were the bullet points of learning for each of them? Kind of like a resume you'd send in for a job application.
I love it.
And I thought that was such a good idea. And I have done I've done my own failure resume, because I think it shifts it from I've had some jobs I didn't like, but I wouldn't say that I'm sorry that I had that job. I needed it at that time because I had rent to pay and, wasn't my favorite job, but I had rent to pay and a car payment or whatever I had, or just food, whatever it was that I needed. And so I think if we kind of shift the intent, I don't know, the intention isn't the right word, but the kind of negative intensity about these failures as they were just experiences that we had, sort of like jobs we had in the past.
Yes. And it's an event. It really, it's very important to look at failing as an event as opposed to a character trait. Right? Yes. You're not a failure. You failed. We all fail. It's a thing that happens in life. What did you learn? How did it perhaps open or close a door that wouldn't have been opened or closed if everything had gone according to plan? And so I think that becomes a new way of looking at it. And I mean, sometimes things just hurt. Sometimes things are just not what you wanted. And I will say at those points in my life when it's been the hardest, and as simple as this sounds, I would just say it is what it is.
Yeah.
Now what? What are you going to do with what is? That's really powerful because there's an acceptance that comes. And again, acceptance is not necessarily approval, right? But
it doesn't mean I loved it. It just means it happened.
It happened and it is. And how do I deal with the fallout of whatever is? That's why I said that probably my favorite rule is control the controllable, accept the rest. And so I've experienced this in my own life. I've observed it with people close to me, like my mother, who had a brain aneurysm years ago while we were on the phone. She was 49 at the time. I was in my 20s. And my mother's journey continues. I mean, by most medical accounts, she shouldn't have even lived through the night that day. But I watch her now as she's overcome so much, but then still dealing with fallout from that, but finding ways to be grateful for the opportunity to still be here and to continue to push through with physical therapy and those types of things. Wow, the level of determination, but then also going like, there's some things I'm not going to be able to change. So what do I want to do with what is? And for me, that's powerful. Not necessarily easy, but it's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hearing the word I'm seeing the word indomitable.
Say the word again.
Indomitable.
Oh, yes. So I have had the very good experience of having role models of resilience in both of my parents, in all of my grandparents, and trying to learn from their resilience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what a brilliant model. And people can choose so differently, right? They can choose so differently. And I'm really appreciating how your mom's mindset really allowed her to continue the journey versus just giving up or turning into a victim and just sitting there and like, I'm done. And but all the things she would have missed had she chosen that.
You're so right, because I can say, there's been a lot of tears. It's been sad it's lost for her, but even as her daughter at times, like, why? Sometimes we ask that question. Why does this person have to go through this? But never giving up. That's huge. So even through tears or frustration, I have watched her continue to do what's necessary to maintain the abilities that she still has. Right. And so she's held on to her ability to walk, and it's gotten harder and harder and harder. And we've had misdiagnoses. For 5 years, she was told she had something called spastic paraplegia. And then last year, they came back with some additional tests and said, oh, nope, that's not what it is. It probably is from this aneurysm. But through all of that, every single day, still doing therapy, still pushing through, knowing that when she gives up, and she won't, but if she did, that could mean walking. And that many people in her position might have done that many years ago. So I see, oh my goodness, she's still walking. I heard her walking about an hour ago. She'll walk in circles. She moved with us a little over a year ago, and she is determined. And that's what resilience requires. And it's not always, it's messy a lot of times. It's not always fun, but it's worth it when you realize I pushed through and I have some things that have been meaningful to me. as a
Right.
result.
Yeah. Beautiful. I mean, and as we're kind of, thinking about this from the framework of coaching, and you're an MCC coach, so you come with a great deal of coach knowledge. You have an institute. For this conversation, what do you think would be really important for coaches or people in the helping professions like therapists or nurses or doctors who work with people? What do you think would be really important for them to walk away with?
Around the resilience conversation?
Yeah, the resilience conversation, or really even these rules on self-compassion. It can be anything, right?
I think that what's most important, and this is my perspective as a coach. We have the power to choose our response to what's happening in our world, and in response to, whether it's a no that you get or a yes that you get, an opportunity that pops up, a relationship in the direction that it's going. And the more intentional we are about those choices, the more likely we are to create the kind of life that we deep down really want. And so there are many things you don't choose. I just, I don't control what happens, around the world. I don't control laws and things that are going on. I don't control other people. But I do control how I choose to look at situations. I choose my perspective. I choose whether I'm going to have a kind response. I get to choose whether I'm going to take care of myself and go take a nap because I'm tired. I get to choose whether I put to use the tools and skills I've learned through coaching and positive psychology and through my faith. Do I believe them? And if I believe them, I use them. And that doesn't mean my outcomes are always perfect, but it means I have this toolkit I can go back to again and again. And what I have found is the toolkit works, and that's exciting to me. And I think it's that power of being able to choose. The most successful people really do think differently. And the rules are all about how you think. Right? It's the choice you make to expect the unexpected. It's the choice you make to choose thoughts that strengthen you, because you don't have to keep holding on to thoughts that weaken you. You can notice them and go, this isn't helping. I'm not showing up well in my relationships when I think this. I better be thinking something else. So I think when we realize that power that we have, it's empowering. And too often we can fall into this trap of a victim or feeling like we don't have a choice. You have a choice. I had a choice when I decided to be happy. It was, that sounds crazy. It was like a light bulb moment for me. I was almost 40. I was divorced. I didn't have any children. I knew that was my dream. Might not be your dream. I really thought I was going to grow up and be Claire Huxtable. I was going to be a lawyer with 5 kids. So, when the thought came to me, because I was I was sad. I was scared. And I was feeling a little bit sorry for myself. And then the thought was like, Valorie, be happy now. Not when you get what you think you need to be happy. Just be happy. You have a lot to be happy about. And it was like, can I do that? Can I just decide to be happy? I was like, yes, you can. You don't have to be happy about what happened, but you can find joy today.
Well, and this really sparks a curiosity for me, which is, I wonder how that choice changed the energy that you put into the world and then attracted the life that you find yourself living. There's a thread, it seems, and I see the smile and a little giggle on your face. What's showing up for you?
it wasn't very long after that Jeff saw my book, Successful Women Think Differently, in the Atlanta airport and tagged me on Facebook. This is 2012. And it just said, should I get this book? And I was like, I know we were Facebook friends. I was like, oh yeah, we went to high school together. Like all our mutual friends were commenting and yeah, Jeff, get the book. You could be a successful woman. Like it was all this kind of joking around. And it turned out we were both in the Atlanta area and we had lunch. So yes, I had decided to just be happy. And then one day, and well,
ding, ding, ding.
The rest is history. I believe it was a lesson I needed to learn.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I learned the lesson. It really, Lyssa, one of the things that I did in order to be happy was I imagined myself not getting those two things I was saying I needed.
Yeah.
And I was about to turn 40, so I imagined if I turned 50 and I never got married, I never had kids. And it was almost like a rhetorical question. Like, what, are you just going to be miserable? And I was like, yeah, that doesn't sound like a good idea.
Not much fun either. That's what.
Like, no, I am not. I'm going to do the other stuff I love to do. I'm going to make a difference in the lives of the kids that are in my family. And I'm going to travel and I'm going to keep inspiring people and I'm going to coach and I'm going to do whatever I do. There must be a reason. If that's not going to happen, there must be a reason. And maybe that's not my path. I stopped being scared that what I wanted to unfold wasn't going to unfold. And I started believing that if it didn't, I'd still be okay. I really believed that. And I looked for role models who showed me that could be the case. And then I wasn't so afraid. So it was like on the other side of the thing I was afraid was going to happen. I decided to picture it, which at first I didn't want to. But then I pictured it and I was like, yeah, be happy. Just be happy. Like this takes a lot of energy to just keep insisting that you won't be happy until this thing, like really? I mean, that's sometimes you have to talk to yourself like that.
Yeah, like wake up. And it's really that swimming against the tide. Like you're never going to beat it. So why not find a way to cross the tide instead, so that you can get to shore? And versus all this energy and angst that goes into fighting what isn't showing up.
Fighting what is. And I think one of my biggest lessons in that is that if I couldn't just be happy without the stuff I was insisting I needed, it was highly likely that when that came into my life, I still would come up with something else that I needed.
No, I think it's 100% true. Just real quick, I remember I was dating somebody. I had been dating a bunch of people before I got married to my husband, Michael. And he was like the last great example of the really bad pattern I had and who I chose. And I remember his name was John. And I remember I wrote him a Dear John letter. And I said, this is, like whatever happens with us, I don't even care anymore. But the reality is I'm choosing me. And so I'm not willing to put up with whatever this is. I'm not interested. I wish you all the best, but I'm choosing me. And I'm not kidding you. Like 3 months later, I met Michael. But I think I had to choose myself first. Like that was the thing I had to do. Like you had to choose the happiness. And I think these things become these pivotal moments in our experience that fundamentally change who we are and the trajectory of our lives, quite frankly.
Yes, I really believe that. And I had to go back to purpose. That's really core of, for me. I said my purpose around inspiring others, but even my thinking around, for me, marriage and motherhood.
Sure.
I had stopped making about me getting married or me being a mom. And the question became, is there someone for example, that I am meant to raise? Is there some unique way that I'm built that I'm meant to be this person's spouse? Like, that was a deeper question, particularly around the motherhood for me. And that couldn't be about me and the role I wanted. That had to be about, is there a child that I'm meant to nurture and love and help shape in this world? And if there is, I'd like to be able to do that. I'd like to be able to do it to the best of my ability. If that's not what I'm meant to do, then I shouldn't be doing it. And so I think I kind of just let go of needing to understand everything about the how and the when and all of those things. And the things I thought needed to be checked off, and just let things unfold.
Yeah, the check boxes of a perfect life. I have two more questions for you. The first is, beyond your own work, you mentioned a book earlier, but is there any work or thought leaders that you would really recommend people to check out that have been instrumental in your own development?
Oh,
And really just maybe one or two. So because we've had a whole line of books.
I've mentioned Marty Seligman. Obviously, that's where I started with the with my positive psychology. Gosh, there's so many people. Obviously, John Maxwell, who I've done a lot of work with, and he mentors me, which is just such an amazing blessing. I didn't see myself as a leader, believe it or not. And growing as a leader has transformed so much of what I do in my business. And I would say, I'm sorry, I keep turning around because like I have a lot of my favorite books behind me. For anybody thinking about some things, there's a couple that I like by coaches. One is my friend Michelle Williams, who many people know from her work on Broadway and in Destiny's Child. She recently graduated from our coach training program because she's doing a lot of work in mental health. And she wrote a book called Checking In, which I can't reach right now. But Checking In is really good around mental health and well-being.
And then the last book?
Okay. And then there's a book, if you're just wanting to grow in terms of your business and your finances. It's another coach. I've never met her. Her name's Rachel Rogers. And the book is brilliant title. We Should All Be Millionaires. Outstanding. So I love recommending, other authors. I've mentioned Dr. Kristen Neff. Her book is just called Self-Compassion. Outstanding. And my favorite positive psychology researcher, Dr. Barb Fredrickson. Her stuff is so good. Positivity is one of her good books around the research of positive emotion and what it does for us and how it helps us to be more successful.
Beautiful, beautiful. So the final question for you today comes from the person I interviewed before you. And the question is, what did you do as a child that made the hours pass by like minutes? And how does it connect with who you are now?
Oh my goodness. This connects to the last question you asked me. Reading books. I would beg my mom to drop me off at the library. And I would just read. I think because I grew up an only child, I have my brother's 20 years younger. So I literally grew up an only child. And my mom taught me to read when I was very young. So I was reading and writing when I was like 3. And I just always, books were like friends to me. So when I realized that part of my mission in life was writing books, like that just deeply resonated. And whenever I've tried to make other parts of my career first, whether speaking or even coaching, I've always been drawn back to write the books that you're going to speak on that are also going to help with coaching and helping coaches to be better at what they do. So writing is my, I don't have a hate relationship. I got a love relationship, but I'm a recovering procrastinator. So the writing sometimes.
There's a whole conversation.
It's a big coaching opportunity for me every time, even though I've written 14 books.
Oh, Valorie, I just can't tell you how much I appreciate your time and your brilliance. Thank you so much for being on the studio today.
Oh, I've so enjoyed this conversation, Lyssa. Thank you for inviting me on. Thank you.